couple of weeks ago, I attended the 12th Oppenheimer Research Conference, and I thought I'd do a video talk about the problems we face that were being discussed. And I'll start with something Jonathan Oppenheimer said, which prompted me to do this video, and I'll attach the little clip here. But during the conference, we listened to many different and very diverse talks. The amount of scientific information and knowledge we have is just incredible. But there were two things that stood out for me. The talks were about specific subjects in different silos, and most were factual and scientific, which is not likely to make the average person or someone hearing about the topic for the first time feel any emotional connection to the subject. But no matter what the topic was, there was a recurring pattern flowing through and connecting every one of those talks. Every speaker talked about social, economic, and environmental problems, and everybody spoke about those problems increasing. And there is a reason for that. Our global problems are social, economic, and environmental, and they are increasing because we think of, study, and manage human societies and the environment as if they were mechanistic and composed of independent, separate things. But they're not. They are natural, incredibly complex living things that are absolutely inseparable. If you think our societies and economies are not an inseparable part of nature, try to get through one day without using anything from nature. You couldn't even go 10 minutes. Because first of all, you need air. Then you need water, then food. Then you need money for pretty much everything else. Everything we consume, produce, and use on Earth comes from nature. Civilization cannot exist without it. Another important point that I don't think many people have realized is that every decision and policy on Earth is only ever being made to meet either a social or economic or environmental objective. And that's because those are the only things human beings manage. We manage ourselves, our finances, and our environment. We don't manage anything else. We produce everything else. Through people managing economies, we use nature to produce everything imaginable, from toothpicks to spacecraft. Our mounting global problems are social, economic, and environmental, and they're increasing no matter how hard we try to solve them, which immediately tells us that our management is failing. The good news is we know why our management is failing and we know how to fix it. In the early 1980s, my father, Alan Savory, discovered the missing piece of a puzzle that has been plaguing humanity for thousands of years. Our inability to manage the complexity of human societies and nature. He discovered that all of us are actually using an identical genetically inherited process every time we make a decision. And that the same process is not just being used by us, but by all tool-using animals. And this inherited process used to work perfectly for us a very long time ago, when our only tools were simple sticks and stones. And it still works for all other tool-using animals who still use simple tools and only make social decisions. When our tools were simple, our decisions were simple. We also only had to make social decisions in our family groups. We didn't have to worry about economic or environmental consequences because there weren't any. Our decisions were not complex. But when we discovered how to control fire, our tools and technology began to advance, which led to a monumental shift in our behavior as a species. And this change resulted in our subconscious genetically inherited way of making decisions becoming flawed and in need of an update if we wanted to adapt to the change. Everything we were producing came from nature, and everything being produced was being bought, sold, and used by people. We were no longer only managing ourselves. We had gradually merged inseparable environmental and economic elements into almost every social decision. Our simple decisions had become complex. But our inherited process caused us to break those new elements down into more manageable parts so that we could still make our decisions in a simple, single context. So what we did is we reduced our new complex decisions into the simpler context of either a social or financial or environmental objective. As soon as we isolate and try to manage any part of something complex, we set off an invisible chain reaction of damaging symptoms across that whole web of complexity. So our increasing problems are the symptoms of us reducing the complexity of our decisions. And these symptoms are what we isolate and discuss at these conferences. So we're trying to solve our problems by using the same decision-making process that causes them. Now, what did Einstein say the definition of insanity is doing? Now, at the conference, Minister Naledi Pandor said in her opening speech, if we can find a way of addressing these triple social, economic, and environmental challenges simultaneously, I think this would be a significant contribution to world development. And we have found a way to do that, of addressing this complexity simultaneously. In 1983, Alan Savory discovered that by adding a couple of very simple steps to our inherited decision-making process, we are able to successfully manage the complexity of our decisions. He called this update to our inherited process the holistic management framework because it is based on Jan Smuts' theory of holism. Now, the holistic management framework teaches us to broaden the context of our decisions, to make sure that we always keep sight of and balance the full and unique social, economic, and environmental complexity of any decision, regardless of whether the objective is a social, economic, or environmental one. This is about learning how to make sure our decisions reflect the incredible and inseparable connections that make up our world. It's about connecting our social and financial stability to environmental health, uniting us beyond our unique personal differences towards a common environmental purpose. Because at the end of the day, none of us can exist without nature. We're not something separate to nature. We are nature. Our decisions have caused us to steadily lose our connection to the natural world, which means we are losing the connection to ourselves. It is time to change the way we make decisions and reconnect ourselves to each other and to our environment before we lose ourselves entirely. If we want to secure our future, we have to unlearn an inherited but now outdated decision-making process and adapt to a new one. This exciting new way of making decisions brings us back into a balance with each other and with the natural world by reflecting that our social and economic stability are inseparable from environmental health. This process would unite all of us beyond our personal differences towards a common environmental ethic. It could immediately unite every person at any conference, whoever they are. But we have to do things differently. I don't believe that anyone will pay attention or want to make any sort of profound change unless they connect to something on an emotional, personal level first. Only once we feel an emotional connection to something are we open and responsive to the rational side of that change. Today we live in a technology-obsessed, disconnected world, and we seem to have forgotten that we owe our entire existence to the biological process of the plant's ability to harness the sun's energy to survive. The change we have to make as a species cannot be robotic and unemotional because we are sentient social beings. This is about collectively joining together as humans. It is about respecting our personal differences and uniting beyond them towards restoring the health of this giant ecosystem that sustains us all. If we're going to bring about any change, we need to feel an emotional, personal connection to that change. One that makes us feel inspired and empowered as individuals first. And that in turn will create a united push for a shift in decision making where it is so urgent at policy level. because that is where we make decisions to manage our societies, economies, and nature at scale. At the end of the day, despite our personal circumstances and differences, we're all simply human, and our individual and collective existence as a species hinges entirely on a collective shift in the way we view and manage ourselves in relation to the natural world. Our future will only be secured when we heal our broken relationship with the laws of nature. And by using the guiding filtering process of the holistic management framework, we are all able to do that.
The significant problems in our country are related to unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And as we address matters of sustainability, if we can find a way of addressing these triple challenges simultaneously, I think this is a significant contribution to world development.
It's no good to be able to say, I told you so. It's not a story that works. We need to fix the problem. And if I were actually not on a public stage, I'd use a whole bunch of four-letter words here. We need the problem. Right? We do. If we don't, we're screwed.